Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, also known as the psychic explorer, is a fourth generation psychic medium who communicates with spirits. He's also Oxford educated, licensed to practice law in Florida, Washington, D.C., and before the United States Supreme Court. Mark is also known as the psychic explorer due to his extensive background in science, quantum physics, survival of consciousness and near-death experiences, history, archaeology, philosophy, and theology. Mark, thank you for joining us. You are a busy, busy guy. We're so glad you're here today. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on the Shift Network. I've been looking forward to this.
I have too, and we've got so much to talk about. So let's go ahead and jump right in and start with a definition of terms. So when you use the word consciousness, what do you specifically mean by that?
Consciousness is the energy that makes us alive and makes us who we are. Now, the term consciousness is used by philosophers, scientists, psychotherapists, but the term that I like to use is either the soul or the spirit, which is used by people of faith. But the thing is, we're talking about the eternal energy that is who we are. And the thing about consciousness is that it is only hosted by the brain. It is not created by the brain. So consciousness pre-exists our body, comes into our body, and when we physically die, it leaves the body.
Okay. All right. So in your research, you've done a lot of research. Have you discovered whether medical science can actually explain how consciousness is created?
Well, that's the big question. Neurobiology is the realm of medical science that studies the brain. And the official position is that consciousness is created by chemical reactions and electronic impulses within our brain. Unfortunately, they can't explain how. And the thing is, if you read a neurobiology book, there may be 1,000 pages on the functions of the brain and 2 or 3 paragraphs, and I mean just a few paragraphs on what consciousness is. We have to think of the brain as a carbon-12 resonator floating in salt water, okay? And I like to compare it to a computer hard drive. A computer hard drive does not create the data and the programs on it. It merely hosts them. So it's the same thing with the consciousness. Consciousness is non-localized. In other words, it pre-exists the body because we are immortal living beings, immortal living spirits, and our consciousness soul comes into the brain/hard drive, and when the hard drive crashes, the body dies, then the consciousness moves on. And we know from the realm of quantum physics that energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. So when we physically die, our consciousness gets uploaded to, well, Microsoft Cloud or the other side, depending on how you want to look at it.
Okay, so as I mentioned when I was introducing you, you are a fourth generation psychic medium. How did you go from just being naturally psychic, it's passed down through the family, just an everyday occurrence in your family, to being so interested in the science of consciousness?
Well, I have literally written books about this. Both of my parents were psychic mediums, but they did not do it professionally. My dad was a Navy SEAL and a NASA engineer. So science has been part of my life from day one. My mother was a commercial illustrator and a fashion designer, fashion model. And so we were the typical American family living next door, sort of. But from a very young age, I saw a connection between eternity and science. I also had a near-death experience when I was 4 years old, and I went into the light. What had happened was I went into cardiopulmonary failure, and I was in an ambulance, and all of a sudden I shot through the roof of the ambulance, and I'm looking down, and I'm seeing it speeding off, and then I'm in this beautiful white light with these beings that They look like the outline of a person, but they were translucent and they glowed from the inside out. The best way I could describe it is they kind of look like an Academy Award, like an Oscar, except instead of being gold, they glowed, and they were very sweet and very kind. And they told me not to worry and that everything would be fine. And then a message came to me from deeper into this bright light that said, "Eternal light, eternal life." And that has really stuck with me my entire life. And so, yes, I certainly believe in God in the afterlife. I mean, it's difficult to do what I do as a medium and not, and certainly after an experience like that. But I also realize that there is a logical explanation for everything, even those which are of a spiritual and metaphysical nature. And to me, it all comes down to an understanding of quantum physics.
Okay. So you had this left brain, right brain upbringing, which beautifully defines how you came to what you're doing now. So in that kind of upbringing, you probably come across the question that where some people believe that the existence of the soul is more of a philosophical concept instead of something that can be proven scientifically. So what are your thoughts on that question?
Well, that's a very good point. We've all heard the question, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And actually, Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosopher, is credited with posing that question, not so much about poultry, but actually about what came first, the consciousness, the brain, or the body. And so the chicken and the egg metaphor was postulated for 18 centuries until Leonardo da Vinci came along. And in Leonardo's time in Renaissance Italy, the big question wasn't whether or not you had a soul, but where was it in the body? And the two schools of thought at the time were it was either the heart, what was known as the cardiocentric soul, or was the soul in the brain, what they referred to as the cephalocentric soul. Well, Leonardo wasn't content to just sit around sipping wine in Italian piazzas and debating it philosophically. He started dissecting bodies, which in Renaissance Italy was banned by the church, and he lived, in Florence and Milan and all throughout Italy. I mean, he was facing the death penalty for doing this. But he was Leonardo da Vinci, and he sort of maneuvered around society. Long story short, he came to the conclusion that the heart was merely a magnificent pump, but the complexity of the brain had to be, in his words, the senso commune, the logical common sense location of the soul. 5 centuries after Leonardo, we now agree with him. The most powerful source of electricity in the body is the heart, but essentially it's a pump, yet the most complex electronic activity in the body is in the cerebral cortex, ergo, the home of the soul.
Interesting. So I'm wondering then, sort of off topic here, you mentioned that when you were a child, you had a cardiac event. Yeah. Do you connect these two together at all? The fact that that's where the energy comes from the heart?
Well, not really, because I've always felt that who and what we are was on a much higher function. The most powerful source of electricity in the body is the heart, because it's a pump. It's a mechanical device, a biomechanical device. But the more sophisticated and complex electrical activity is within the brain. And so I've always felt that the soul resided in the brain. And, of course, now we're seeing this in survival of consciousness and near-death experience studies. And, it's very interesting to think that in Renaissance Italy, people believe that the soul was actually in the heart. But if you think about it, when you see somebody you love, your heart pounds, or when you get afraid, you get these sensations here. So they were equating physiological reactions to thought processes, which now we know that the thought processes and the physiological reactions, the control center is actually in the brain.
Thanks for listening. Check out Castle Gate, a novel based on my own ancestral healing journey at lisabonis.com. In 1921, 4 men set off from Scotland to the United States. Will Garrock, his brother Pete, his son Willie, and his nephew Thomas, all coal miners. They left behind the miners' rows and the nationwide mining strike with its soup kitchens. Their destination was Castlegate, Utah, where they had kin to welcome them before sending for their wives and children. They prospered in America, working in one of the finest mines in Utah. Until that tragic day, March 8th, 1924. Disaster struck. 3 explosions, trapping 171 men inside. Rescue crews worked tirelessly for days, but sadly, they could not save a soul. Women were widowed and children were orphaned, and some never recovered from their broken hearts. Castlegate is the true and tragic saga of a Scottish family whose dreams of finding their fortunes in the bountiful coal mines of Castlegate, Utah during the Prohibition era explode in one of the most devastating mine disasters in American history. Learn more at lisabonnes.com.